Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our session, Automation in Action, Strategies for Risk Management. My name is Generative. I am a worldwide specialist business architect with cloud operations and focusing on systems manager, resource management, which is resource explorer, tagging, and also cloud governance. And today I'm here with my friend, Vi.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Vaishu Kadambi. I'm a worldwide partner specialist covering cloud ops management, so what Narita does but for partners. And yeah, we're really excited today to talk about automated risk mitigation. Shall we get started? Okay, great. So why are we here, right? What's the context of this talk? While humans can react in 200 milliseconds, modern cyber threats operate at machine speed, as all of you guys know. But threat actors increasingly leverage automation in their attacks, making manual responses insufficient. To maintain effective security, organizations need automated security controls and remediation capabilities that can detect, respond, and mitigate threats in real time. This is why AWS Cloud Operations emphasizes automated security tooling, such as auto remediation through event triggers and centralized security management to stay ahead of potential threats. Okay, now I'm going to go through the NIST risk management framework. So risk assessment is one of the fundamental components of an organizational risk management process, as described by NIST special publication. Risk assessments are used to identify, estimate, and prioritize risk to organizational operations, organizational assets, individuals, and other organizations. The purpose of risk assessments is to inform decision makers and support risk responses by identifying, one, relevant threats to organizations or threats directed through organizations, two, vulnerabilities both internal and external to the organization, three, impact or harm to organizations that may occur given the potential for threats, exploiting vulnerabilities, and lastly, likelihood that harm will occur. The end result is the determination of risk. The NIST risk management framework, as you can see here, provides a disciplined, structured, and flexible process for managing security and privacy risks that includes information security categorization, control selection, implementation and assessment, system and common control authorizations, and continuous monitoring. The RMF framework up here includes activities to prepare organizations to execute the framework at appropriate risk management levels. Amazing. I'll hand it over to Narita.
Now, before I start, how many of you have to abide by a regulatory framework? All right, majority of us, right? Not just NIST, but there's always PCI, any other regulatory framework, and this could be applicable to everything. And where we start that journey is really the type of controls. Now, the different types of controls defined within the regulatory framework, right? So there are, well, control is a rule that is evaluating your configurations based on something that you desire. Now, that could be either in different services, but in this sense, we start with preventative controls. Now, these preventative controls are, think of them as your first line of defense. And these are allowing or preventing an event from recurring. Now, when we focus on proactive controls, this is pretty much thinking about if your resource is compliant with your policy and objectives before they're provisioned. So taking that proactive approach before that resource is provisioned. And then we go into detective controls. Once that resource is provisioned, what happens that we're able to detect that configuration meets our standards, right? This is kind of universal that we've seen through all our different controls and throughout our sessions at Inforce. And when we think of preventative controls, we're thinking about service control policies with organizations that are either allowing or disallowing you to provision a resource, let's say for S3. Disallowing for you to create any buckets that have public access. Or we're thinking about proactive controls where if you're using infrastructure as code, primarily, CloudFormation, you have a way or an ability to use CloudFormation hooks that says, I do not want you to provision a resource that, say, has no encryption. We want EC2 or EBS volumes to be encrypted. You can use a proactive control to not allow that resource to make it to the end of the CI/CD pipeline altogether. Or when it comes to detective controls, how many people use config? Good amount of people use config, right? And config is one of our main services where you are creating these different rules for your environments that abide to the certain desired state of that configuration. And so config is more of a detective control of when that resource is actually deployed, how can you detect it's meeting those standards? And a control that most people don't think about, that I don't have on here, is a responsive control. So what happens after that resource has been configured? What do you have to remediate? How long do you have to have that control or that configuration available in your account that you do not desire, right? And so when we think of establishing really an effective strategy for NIST, any compliance framework, it's really looking at these different type of controls and layering them, right? It's not one or the other. It's thinking about which one makes the most sense for that workload. And when you think of, let's say, the first line of defense, which is preventative, this is really helping from those unauthorized configuration changes or access controls. And then you're building that up with detective and responsive controls, detect that resource, remediate that resource. And proactive is just the complementary of it all together to pull that in all together from the different workloads. So when we think about when do we implement these controls, we're really thinking about from the moment that workload is live, what is the severity or the impact of that workload? So if that workload is a critical workload, you want to make sure you have the different controls that are complementing it. So maybe you have a standard controls that say, yes, this account and workload can only have, but as you build up to the different impact of that workload, you're adding additional and more security focus or compliance focus to give you a full end-to-end. And when we think of how does that look like in our shift left culture, we're thinking about that. How do we implement that? How many of you guys use CI/CD pipelines? From authoring your code? Exactly, right? That is our strategy when we want to. We don't want to manually deploy resources. We want to do that through a pipeline altogether. So when we think of this whole end-to-end solution, preventative controls are going to be really at when you are building out those resources, and then proactive is when you're deploying those resources. And then detective is really at the very end of this staging. Now, why do we want to focus on shift left? It's a big topic as well at Reinforce, and it's really focusing on being a little more effective when it comes to these different strategies. When you detect misconfigurations ahead of time, you're reducing that experience or that friction of at the end when you're monitoring it, right? You don't want to deploy a whole application and then have to revert back or do a rollback because it didn't meet certain compliance. You want to make sure from the moment that you are building that code, you are already standardizing between different teams what is great, what is not. And so when we think of like proactive controls down there when we're deploying it, that is really focusing on making sure that if there's anything to do, you're already doing that ahead of time. So think of those whole CloudFormation hooks. You're saying, no, I don't want those S3 buckets made public. I want to encryption already within my code. And you're making sure that throughout each process, it's where you need to make those configuration changes in those desired states. So let's align this to the different toolings and the different services that make up a CI/CD pipeline, right? You have services like Amazon Q Developer. I'm going to ask a funny question. Who hasn't heard of Amazon Q Developer? That's a rare one. It's a good one. I actually was thinking 100%, but yes. You know, we have Amazon Q Developer that is, you know, a generative AI assistant, really, that is helping you develop your code and find implement security scans and transform your code to understand what is it meeting and make suggestions based on it, right? Or we have services like Amazon Code Guru. Anybody use Code Guru? All right, this is actually a pretty good one because think of Amazon Code Guru as a application security testing tool, right? think of combining machine learning and automated testing to really identify vulnerabilities, establish best practices into your code altogether. So instead of you having to validate it by yourself or think this meets standards, but is it really meeting standards, you're able to use Amazon Code Guru Security to kind of help you build out that, that status of what is happening and track that all together. And then how do you combine all these different services is kind of looking at Code Catalyst. Anybody heard of Amazon Code Catalyst? All right, this is one of our newer products, right? Or one of our first products that we launched all together. Now, this is a way for you to set up that foundation. So, how many of you know how to fully code? That is actually rare. Majority of people do not know how to code, right? Sometimes if you have the old school guys, they know how to, or old school people, I should say, they all know how to code, but sometimes you need a blueprint on how to code and how to establish, what is needed. Code Catalyst works with Amazon Q Developer and builds out a whole blueprint for you to be able to build out an application or build some guardrails all together. Put in your CI/CD pipeline to bring it as a true end-to-end phasing all together. And then once we establish all these different services, then we think about monitoring, the after thing, right? When I talked about response controls are always the afterthought, we want to start using services like Systems Manager to be able to remediate any remediations that need to be done for that resource. So if a resource becomes non-compliant, what are you doing right away or taking as a manual action altogether? And I do want to talk about Gentic AI or Generative AI beyond those different services, right? So when we think about, Gentic AI for managing risk, we're thinking about using Bedrock. And what you can use within Bedrock is create your own different agents, right? If we start off at the bottom right-hand corner, where we talk about us as an operations team, we can provide Bedrock different data sets or different inputs for them to evaluate our resource. So in this case, we're going to use, let's say, Audit Manager. Audit Manager is the ability for you to look at any compliance framework and understand the different controls that are tied to that framework and pump in different data from different services into it to be able to say, where do you stand, let's say, for NIST or PCI or any of the different regulatory frameworks it has. And so what we do here is by leveraging Bedrock, we are creating a way for it to validate what is in our environment and taking observations within the environment. And you could create an agent that says is focused on compliance or let's say operations, and they can communicate to say, hey, is it valid, is it not valid? Can you see what I have in my account? All the different config rules that are within my account. And let's say I'm using the NIST framework and I might be missing some controls. You could tell Bedrock as an agent to say, what are some different rules that I could be missing? It could create those rules, it could deploy those rules all together. And then also that last part of response remediation and be able to ultimately remediate any of those resources that have already been deployed and it doesn't match what we're looking for. So this, all in all, is kind of like a little gist of how you can use generative AI, Gentic AI for risk management altogether. There's more strategies when it comes. There's also best practices with it. And also how our partners can help you alleviate that, right? Sometimes we don't have the knowledge or we don't have the manpower. And this is where partners come into play, which Vaishu is going to talk to us about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Narita. So are there any partners around here? Partner? Okay, so you guys could all work with a partner maybe? But yeah, just wanted to spend some time talking about partners while Narita did a great job explaining everything about automating risk mitigation, right? Like some of this is really challenging and you might need help. So that's where partners, especially our cloud ops competency partners, can come in and implement these solutions for you. So let me first give you an overview of the AWS Cloud Ops Competency Program. Our validated partners offer comprehensive solutions across 5 key solution areas. As you can see here, it's cloud governance, cloud financial management, monitoring and observability, compliance and auditing, and operations management. Me and Narita cover operations management, so it's very, very cool.
Also known as AWS Cloud Operations.
Yeah. For automated risk mitigation specifically, right, what we learned today, you can see how partners integrate across multiple of our solution areas, particularly cloud governance, compliance, and operations management. What's important is that all these partner solutions have been thoroughly vetted, literally by our technical and business our team, and validated by AWS to ensure that they can support your cloud operations needs at scale. All right. There's a lot up here, but I just wanted to show you the Cloud Operations Competency Framework. We have 2 different paths, one for service partners, so like consulting or professional service partners, and then also there's an ISV one which we'll show you next, but these 2 paths enable organizations to implement cloud operations based on their specific requirements and capabilities. While both paths provide the same 5 core solution areas, they differ on delivery modes. This dual path approach, along with the comprehensive solution areas, was developed in direct response to customer needs and operational challenges in managing AWS environments. So, like I mentioned, this is for the services path. And then this one is the software path or for ISVs, right? So same solution areas, different categories underneath. And I just wanted to spend a little bit more time on the ISV or the software path, right? So today we talked about automating risk mitigation, and I wanted to show you a concrete example of how our partners can create value by integrating multiple solution areas. So we gave an example of HashiCorp's Terraform solution, and they combined elements from cloud governance, like centralized identity and security management, as well as secure, high-performing and resilient foundations. And then they also do operations management capabilities for automated controls deployment, as well as compliance and auditing features to maintain security requirements. What's powerful about this integration is that customers can automate their infrastructure deployment while maintaining security and compliance guardrails, which is exactly why we were what we were discussing earlier with automated risk mitigation. Their solution handles everything from the initial secure infrastructure deployment through ongoing compliance management. This is just one example of how our cloud operations competency partners can help implement the automation strategies that we discussed earlier in a validated and proven way. Amazing. So I know you're super convinced, right, to work with competency partners, but in case you need some more data, right, it's helpful for customers to prioritize cloud operations as well as partners. So as you can see, there's a high customer impact, lots of numbers. You're welcome to read them, but as you can see, it's a good ROI, right? There's reduced time to market. It's good for the environment, which is always good. And then also it helps with talent productivity, and it leads to less downtime for customers. And there's also a really good partner opportunity, which it translates to faster growth, higher impact, higher demand, and as well as for every dollar spent on AWS solutions, partners can generate $6.40 in additional revenue. So lots of goodness. Cloud operations. Okay. And if you're still not convinced, I know there are no partners in the crowd, but if you join our competency program, we have a lot of different benefits we provide. There's some that are specific to cloud operations, but some of them are pretty standardized, like you get MDF, right, marketing funds to use. Some specific ones for this competency, though, would be the Partner Advisory Board, where we pick the top cloud operations partners, and they get exclusive access to roadmap and product teams, and they can give us feedback. Also, Partner Equip, which is great. It's a live enablement session, which is also exclusively for cloud operations competency partners. So these are all the benefits. If you are a partner, please join if you have a valid solution. But yeah, that's it. These are resources for the things Narita talked about, if you want to just add about that.
Yeah, if anything, compliance and assurance of AI systems, this is going to really focus more on you developing that strategy when you do any generative AI or AI agents. The compliance workshop is going to walk you through some of our scenarios of how to implement different controls in your environment. And then Amazon Bedrock and Security and Privacy just goes over the overview of Bedrock. And then our best practices for Gen AI, we just came out with this framework, and it just goes beyond, implementing those services, but what does it mean to have those different applications? And just like Weishu was saying, if you are interested in meeting a partner or exploring the partner, there we do have a village right behind us in the back at aisle 1400 talking about different partners that we have, and it's beyond cloud operations. There's different partners that help for different use cases. So
yes,
thank you so much.
Sorry. Yeah, you can also look at our public URL page, or if you're a partner and want to become specialized, you can look at that second QR code. But yeah, visit us at our booth. We have swag and fun and
really
amazingness.
Great swag. So.
Great swag, backpacks, water bottles, smiles. Okay. Great, that's it. Thank you so much for your time. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you.